I've flipped probably a dozen cars off Craigslist over the last few years. Buy low, fix what's broken, sell for a few hundred profit. It's not glamorous, but it keeps me from going stir crazy between jobs. I know what a scam looks like. I thought I knew, anyway. The listing came up on a Tuesday morning. 2014 Ram 1500, clean title, 97,000 miles, asking $8,400. The photos were decent, taken in a gravel driveway, good light, no obvious body damage. The description said the seller was relocating for work and needed it gone by the weekend. I've seen that line 100 times. Half the time it's real. I messaged through the app. He replied in maybe 10 minutes, which felt normal. Said his name was Dale and he was up in Klamath Falls. That's about 4 hours north of me. Not ideal, but not crazy for a deal that clean. We texted back and forth through Wednesday. He seemed normal, knew the truck, could tell me the tire size, what the last oil change was, that the passenger window was a little slow. That last detail stuck with me later. Scammers don't usually volunteer small defects. I took it as a good sign. I should have called him. That's the thing I keep coming back to. I had every reason to call, and I just didn't. I told myself I preferred texting because it kept a paper trail. That's true. But the real reason was that I didn't want to seem too eager and talk myself out of a deal I already wanted. We agreed on Friday. I'd drive up, look it over, cash in hand. I left my place around 6 in the morning. October, so it was still dark when I hit the highway, that flat gray you get before sunrise, when the road feels like it's still asleep. I had the address in my GPS, a county road just outside of town, and Dale's number saved as a contact. About 2 hours in, somewhere past Grants Pass, I texted him to say I was on my way. He replied, "See you around 10, truck's ready." Everything was fine. The first thing I noticed was the road. I turned onto the county route, and the pavement ended after about a quarter mile. Just dropped into gravel without any warning, the kind of rough washboard that makes your feelings hurt. My GPS kept recalculating. The address it was routing me to was a parcel number, not a house number, not a named road. I figured it was a rural thing. Lots of properties up there don't have standard addresses. I kept going. The second thing I noticed was that I had 1 bar of service. I checked the time, 9:45. I sent Dale another text. Getting close. Road got interesting. The message delivered, but no reply. I told myself he was probably outside with the truck, no reception. I told myself that for about 6 minutes until I reached the end of the road. There was a clearing, a rusted gate standing open like it had been open for years. Beyond it, a gravel lot with some old farm equipment off to one side. A harrow or a disc, something I couldn't identify. A weathered out building on the far edge, probably 40 feet long, the kind with the corrugated metal roof that's turned completely orange with rust. No truck, no car, no person. I sat in my car with the engine running and looked at it. My first thought was that I'd beaten him there. Maybe he'd had to make a quick run into town. I checked my phone. Still 1 bar. I tried calling and it rang 4 times and went to voicemail. The voicemail said, "You've reached D. Harmon. Leave a message." Last name I hadn't gotten before. I left a short one. "Hey, it's Marcus. I'm at the property. Give me a call when you're close." I got out of the car. I don't know exactly why. I think I was convincing myself everything was fine by going through the motions of someone doing a normal thing. I walked toward the outbuilding. The gravel was loose and my boots punched through it unevenly. The morning was cold and still. No wind, and I could hear myself breathing. The outbuilding sliding door was open about 2 feet. There was a padlock on the hasp, but it was hanging open, the shackle loose. I pushed the door open another foot and looked in. I'm still not sure what I expected. The truck, maybe, or nothing. What I saw was a folding table with a laptop on it. not a setup for selling vehicles. The laptop was closed. Beside it, a cardboard box. In the box, and I could see this clearly because the light from the door hit it directly, were stacks of what looked like driver's licenses. State IDs, Oregon, California, Washington. Dozens of them, maybe more. I stared at it for what felt like a long time, but was probably 3 seconds. Then, I stepped back and pulled the door shut, very quietly, like a noise would matter. My hands were doing something they do sometimes when I'm trying to stay calm, pressing the pads of my fingers against my thighs, one at a time, which I don't even realize I'm doing until afterward. I turned and walked back to my car at a pace I can only describe as controlled, not running, not casual, the kind of walk where you're telling your legs not to do the thing they want to do. I got in, locked the doors, put it in reverse. My phone still had 1 bar. I called 911 and got a dispatcher. I told her what I'd found. She asked me to stay on the property and I said, very calmly I think, I'd rather not. She took the address, the parcel number, and said she'd send a deputy. I drove back down the washboard road and pulled over near the pavement and sat there with the car running. The deputy arrived about 40 minutes later, a second unit about 10 minutes after that. They went in, they came back out. One of them walked over to my window and asked me some questions. How did I find the listing? How long I'd been in contact with the seller? Did I touch anything? I said I'd pushed the door open and then pulled it shut. He wrote that down. He told me the outbuilding had more than IDs. He didn't say what else. I didn't ask. I've thought about that a lot since then. Whether I should have asked. Whether knowing would be better or worse than not knowing. The Craigslist listing came down within a few hours. The phone number I'd been texting was a Google Voice number tied to an email address that had been created 4 days before I contacted them. Dale Harmon doesn't exist, as far as anyone could tell me. I drove home that same afternoon. I stopped at a McDonald's somewhere around Medford and sat in the parking lot and ate a sandwich I don't remember tasting. I kept looking at the car parked facing me, a silver sedan, nobody in it, and feeling like I should be able to tell if it had been there before, if I'd passed it on the way in, if it had followed me out. I couldn't tell. I still can't. That's the part that hasn't let go more than anything else. Not the IDs, not the building, not the fake name. It's the silver sedan that probably had nothing to do with any of it. It's the fact that I can't be sure. It's that I drove 4 hours into a trap that someone built specifically to feel like a normal transaction. And if I'd gotten there 20 minutes earlier, or if they'd been running late, or if one thing had gone differently, I don't know what I would have walked into. The truck was never there. It was never going to be there. I check Craigslist less now. When I do, I call first. I've been putting off writing this for almost 2 years. Every time I sit down to do it, I tell myself I don't have enough distance yet, and then I find something else to do. I think the real reason is that writing it down makes me confront the part where I made the wrong call, and I've been pretty comfortable not doing that. I was 26, working for a small HVAC company in Columbus, Ohio. Entry-level, running service calls during the day. Sometimes helping with installs on weekends, when we were short-handed. The money wasn't bad, but my apartment lease was ending, and I needed somewhere cheaper. A buddy of mine suggested Craigslist. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. This was a Thursday evening in late October. I'd been scrolling the housing listings for about an hour when I found it. A room for rent in a house on the east side. $450 a month, utilities included. The photos showed a clean, ordinary bedroom. The listing said the landlord was named Dale, that he was a retired contractor, and that he preferred quiet, working tenants. I emailed him. He wrote back within 10 minutes. We exchanged maybe 6 messages over the next 2 days. He was straightforward. 1 year lease minimum, no smoking, no pets. I told him about my job, that I kept regular hours, that I wasn't much of a party person. He seemed satisfied with that. He gave me an address and we set up a showing for the following Saturday afternoon, around 2. I drove out there on a clear, cold afternoon. The house was a 2-story on a residential street, older but well kept. I remember thinking the gutters looked freshly cleaned. Dale answered the door before I could knock. He was maybe 60, heavy-set, wearing a flannel shirt. He had a firm handshake, and he looked me in the eye when he talked. I decided immediately that he was a normal person, and that my instincts about people were reliable. That was my mistake. Not the only one, but the one I keep coming back to. He showed me the room, the shared bathroom, the kitchen. Everything was clean. The room had a window that looked out onto the backyard. There was a lock on the bedroom door. I asked if there were other tenants, and he said there had been a young woman renting the downstairs room, but she'd moved out 3 weeks ago. He said he liked having a tenant, but wasn't in a rush. I believed all of this because it sounded reasonable. I asked if I could use the bathroom before I left, and he said of course. The bathroom was at the end of the upstairs hall. While I was washing my hands, I noticed something in the medicine cabinet mirror. I'd opened it by accident. The hinge was loose, a prescription bottle. That part wasn't strange. What was strange was the name on the label. It wasn't Dale's last name. It was a woman's first name, Kendra. He'd told me the previous tenant had moved out 3 weeks ago. I told myself she'd probably just forgotten it. People forget things when they move. I closed the cabinet and didn't say anything. I signed the lease 2 weeks later. The first 10 days were completely normal. Dale was quiet. He cooked in the evenings, sometimes offered me food, didn't push conversation if I wasn't in the mood. He kept the heat at 68, which I thought was a little low but didn't argue about. I worked my regular hours, came home, watched TV in my room. I told myself I'd found a good situation. Then one evening I came home and the door to the downstairs room, the room that was supposed to be vacant, was open about 3 inches. I stood in the hallway for a moment. The light inside was off. I could smell something, faint, that I couldn't immediately identify. Something chemical, or maybe just old wood. I told myself Dale had probably been in there cleaning or checking on something. I went upstairs. That night, I heard the floor creak below my room, slow and deliberate. Well after midnight, I lay still and counted the steps. 7, 8, then nothing. I told myself it was the house settling. Older houses make noise. I'd grown up in an older house. I knew what settling sounded like, but I counted the steps again in my head. 8 steps from the downstairs hall to the door of that room. That's how many steps it was. I'd walked it myself. I got up, and I did the thing I shouldn't have done. I went back to sleep. I called my buddy the next morning and mentioned it kind of casually, the way you do when you want someone to tell you it's nothing. He said it was definitely nothing. I felt better for about 4 hours. The following Thursday, I came home early, around 4. My last call had canceled. I pulled into the driveway and noticed Dale's truck wasn't there, which was unusual. He was almost always home by mid-afternoon. The front door was unlocked, which was normal. He left it unlocked during the day. I went inside and the downstairs room door was open again. This time, it was open all the way. I stood in the entryway and looked down the hall. From where I was standing, I could see the foot of a cot. It was against the far wall, just visible from the angle. There was a blanket on it. It was folded, but the fold was uneven, the kind of fold you make in a hurry or in the dark. There was a glass of water on the floor next to the cot. The glass had condensation on it. I didn't go closer. I stood there and ran through every explanation I could think of. Dale used the room for storage, and sometimes slept in there when his back was bad. The previous tenant had left bedding behind. He was setting it up for a new tenant and hadn't mentioned it. I had a lot of explanations, and not one of them covered the glass of water with condensation on it at 4 in the afternoon on a Thursday when Dale's truck was not in the driveway. I went upstairs and sat on my bed. My hands were doing something strange. Not shaking exactly, more like vibrating. Fine and fast, the way they do when you've had too much coffee. I called the HVAC office and told them I wasn't feeling well. Then I sat there for a while longer than I'd like to admit. Dale came home at 6:30. I heard his truck. I heard him come inside. I heard him walk to the downstairs room and close the door. I came downstairs at 7 and made dinner, and he came out of that room. And we sat in the kitchen and he told me about a property he used to own in Zanesville. And I nodded and I didn't say anything. I told myself there was a reasonable explanation for all of it and that I would feel stupid when I found out what it was. I know how this sounds. I didn't leave that night. I should have. That's the part I keep returning to, in the quiet hours, the part where I decided that asking felt more awkward than staying. I was 26 years old, and I didn't want to be wrong. 2 days later, on a Saturday morning, I told Dale I'd be spending the weekend at a friend's place. This was not true. I drove to a motel off I-70 and checked in and called my brother and told him everything. He went quiet in a way that confirmed it wasn't nothing. He looked up the address online, public records. It took him about 40 minutes. The previous tenant, not Kendra, a different woman, the one Dale had told me about, had filed a missing persons report in August, filed by her mother. The woman's name wasn't Kendra. She was 24. She had given her mother Dale's address as her new place of residence. That was the last contact. The report was still open. I called Columbus PD from the motel room. I told them everything. The cot, the glass of water, the medicine cabinet, the footsteps. They sent someone to the house that evening. I wasn't there for what they found in the basement. My brother told me afterward, secondhand, what the responding officer had said. I haven't looked for more detail than that. I've made a deliberate choice about how much I need to know. Dale was arrested the following morning at a gas station 2 counties over. The case is still in the court system. I've stopped following it. What I think about now, more than anything else, is the medicine cabinet. The prescription bottle with Kendra's name on it. I told myself she'd forgotten it. I closed the cabinet and I didn't say anything, and I signed a lease and I moved in. Kendra wasn't the woman from the missing persons report. The investigators told me she was a previous tenant from almost a year before. They said they were looking into it. I don't know what that means. I've decided, for now, not to ask. The listing was still active on Craigslist. When they arrested him, I checked out a reflex the morning after. $450 a month, utilities included. The photos were the same. The bedroom with the window that looked out onto the backyard. The room with the lock on the door. I closed the tab. I haven't opened a Craigslist housing listing since. I want to be upfront about something before I get into this. I made a stupid decision. I knew at the time it was a little stupid. I told myself it was fine because I was desperate. And desperate people are very good at convincing themselves of things. I'd been sleeping on my friend Dara's couch for 3 weeks. I was between jobs, got laid off from a distribution warehouse in August, and the job market in Bakersfield in late summer is not exactly flush. My savings were thin. I needed somewhere cheap, fast, and I needed to not ask my parents for money again. The Craigslist ad said $675 a month, utilities included, furnished 1 bedroom in a 4-unit building on Oleander Avenue. No credit check. First month and deposit cash or Zelle. The photos showed a clean kitchen, a full-size bed with a gray comforter, a window with decent light. I read it 3 times looking for the catch. I emailed the address in the listing. The response came back in about an hour. The landlord's name was Phyllis Kern. She wrote in, That way older people write emails, complete sentences, a little formal, a sign-off that said, "Best regards." She said the unit had just become available because her previous tenant had relocated suddenly for a nursing position in Tucson. She said she preferred renters who were clean, quiet, and employed or actively seeking work. She asked for references. I gave her 2. My old supervisor at the warehouse and a woman I'd rented from 2 years prior, down in Taft. I don't know if she called them. I don't think she did. We exchanged maybe 6 emails over 3 days. She seemed normal. She answered questions specifically. The building had 1 parking spot per unit, laundry was coin-op in the carport, the neighbors on either side were both working professionals who kept to themselves. She mentioned the previous tenant had left a few boxes in the closet that she hadn't gotten around to clearing out yet. She'd have them removed before I moved in. She did not. I Zelled her $1,350 on a Thursday morning. She texted me the lockbox code at noon and said the key would be inside and that she was in Fresno visiting her sister, but would stop by in the next week or 2 to handle the paperwork in person. I should have met her in person before sending money. I knew that. I knew that while I was doing it. But the rent was $675 a month, and I was sleeping on a couch. I showed up that afternoon with my car packed. The building was real, a beige stucco 4-unit, 2 up and 2 down, the kind you see on every other block in that part of Bakersfield. Unit 3 was on the upper left. I punched in the lockbox code. The key was there. The smell hit me when I opened the door. Not rot, not mold, something harder to name. A lived-in smell, like a room that had been closed up with someone's stuff still inside it. I figured it was the boxes. I figured it would air out. I didn't look at the boxes right away. That's the thing I keep coming back to. I walked past them and set my bags down and opened the window. And then I went out to my car to start unloading. And I was already thinking about where to put the TV. I noticed the first thing around 7 that evening. I was making a sandwich in the kitchen and I opened the cabinet above the stove, looking for salt. There were spices in there. Not mine. I hadn't put anything in yet. McCormick garlic powder, a small jar of red pepper flakes, a bottle of soy sauce with the label worn down on one side. The kind of worn down you get from picking something up the same way, in the same spot, dozens of times. Someone's spices, recently used. I stood there for a moment. Then I told myself the previous tenant must have left them, that Phyllis had missed them when she cleared out the unit. Completely normal. I set the salt on the counter and made my sandwich and watched Netflix on my laptop. And around 10 I went to sleep. The sound woke me up at some point deep in the night. Not loud, that was the thing. If it had been loud, I would have been up immediately, heart going. Instead, it was the kind of sound that works its way into whatever you're dreaming and pulls you slowly to the surface. A low, rhythmic movement. Footsteps, maybe, in the unit below. Or in the walls. I lay still and listened. It stopped after a minute. I went back to sleep. The next morning, I opened the closet. There were 4 boxes like Phyllis had mentioned. Standard moving boxes, flaps tucked in. I told myself I'd stack them neatly and wait for her to arrange pickup. But the top flap on one of them had been pushed down slightly. The corner was creased like someone had pressed it open and then tried to flatten it back. Not sealed, not like the others. I pulled it open. It wasn't packed, it was organized. Folded t-shirts on one side, a manila envelope on the other, fat, with papers. On top of the shirts, a phone charging cable, the end of it still curled from being wrapped around something, a pair of reading glasses in a soft case. The case had a small sticker on the bottom, the kind pharmacies put on when they write your name on your prescription glasses. The name on the sticker was partially peeled, but I could read the first 3 letters, D-A-R. I put the flap back down. My mouth had gone dry in a way I didn't understand yet. I texted Phyllis, "Hey, The boxes are still here. Can we set up a time for you to grab them?" She replied 4 hours later. "So sorry, we'll arrange that soon." "How are you settling in?" I said fine. I said fine because I needed it to be fine. I started noticing other things. A bar of soap in the bathroom that was not new, used down to maybe a third of its original size, sitting in the dish beside the sink. I'd assumed it was just a leftover, but the dish was dry when I arrived, and I hadn't used that sink yet. When I looked again the next morning, the bar was wet. I told myself I was misremembering. I told myself the residual humidity from my own shower had gotten to it. I repeated this to myself with the specific patient tone you use when you're explaining something to someone who's upset, except I was both the person explaining and the person who needed convincing. I checked the front door. Locked. The lockbox on the outside, I looked it up, the model, could be reset remotely by the landlord. I didn't know if Phyllis had given anyone else a code. I texted her again. "Quick question. Was anyone else using the unit between your last tenant and me moving in?" She said, "No. Why do you ask?" I said, "Never mind. That night I wedged a kitchen chair under the front door handle before I went to sleep. I told myself it was just a habit I had. I don't have that habit." Saturday morning I went out to get coffee and came back to find my front door unlocked. I had locked it. I know I locked it because I'd started doing the kind of deliberate self-witness locking where you say the action out loud to yourself. Locked. I had said it. I had touched the deadbolt with my thumb to confirm it. It was unlocked when I got back. The chair was still wedged under the handle from the inside, which meant whatever had happened while I was out. Someone had a key. Someone had a key, came in, and left. I stood in the hallway for a long time. The building was quiet. I could hear a TV somewhere downstairs. A normal Saturday sound. I pushed the door open and stood in the doorway without going in. The apartment looked the same. Nothing visibly moved. I made myself walk through it. Kitchen, bathroom, the single bedroom. And I checked under the bed and inside the closet. And I am aware of how that sounds. The closet boxes were still there. Still stacked the same way, but the top box, the one I'd opened, it was taped shut now. I called the non-emergency police line. I explained the situation. I had rented an apartment. I believe someone else had access, and had possibly been inside. I had found personal property that may not belong to me. The dispatcher was patient. She said she'd send someone to do a welfare check and take a report. The officer who showed up was maybe 30, tired looking in the way of someone at the end of a long shift. I walked him through it. He took notes. He looked at the box, at the soap, at the door. He asked for Phyllis's contact information. He stepped out to the hallway to make a call. I could hear part of it through the door, his voice going quieter at one point. A pause, then the sound of him writing something. He came back in and asked me when I had last spoken to Phyllis. I said that morning by text. He looked at his notebook. He said he'd looked up the property records. He said the owner of the building was a man named Gerald Ashworth, who had owned it for 11 years. He said the name Phyllis Kern did not appear in any records associated with the address. He asked me to show him the Zelle transaction. I showed him. $1,350 to an account labeled P. Kern. Already withdrawn. I've been trying to piece together what actually happened, and here's where I've landed, more or less. Someone, maybe a former tenant, maybe someone who knew the building, had been using that apartment, not living there full time, using it, keeping things there, coming and going. And when I showed up with my bags in my car and my idiotic relief at finding an affordable place, they didn't just stop, they kept coming back. The ad, Phyllis Kern, the email chain, the lockbox code, all of it was built to get me to hand over money and then move into a space someone else was already occupying. Whether they made a key for the lockbox or already had one to the unit, I can't tell you. What I can tell you is that they came back after I was already there, while I was sleeping 8 feet away, while I was out getting coffee. The detective I spoke to 2 days later said these kinds of schemes sometimes run simultaneously across multiple listings, that Phyllis might have multiple units, multiple tenants, money coming in from all of them. She said that like it would make me feel better, that it wasn't personal. I think about the reading glasses in the soft case. The cable still coiled like someone had just unplugged it. Whoever that box belonged to, they'd packed it deliberately. They knew someone was coming, and they came back anyway, while I was there, and sealed it back up. I don't know what that means. I don't know what they wanted with it, or with me, or whether there was a difference. I moved out the next day. I'm back on Dara's couch. I still sleep with something against the door.